It seems like every time we pull you in, there's always something that we call the 800-pound gorilla.
Uh-oh.
I think once there was the Tim Kennedy and Yoel Romero, and then the last time, what was it?
Wasn't it an eye poke or something?
I forget. Obviously, I'm going to get to
knows?
Weidman and Mousasi, but there was something else, and you're always ready to tackle it. So Weidman and Mousasi.
Okay.
Before we get into what happened,
Sure.
what would you call all that? Can we call it a learning experience, an unfortunate experience? Just the overall
It's all
what
that.
happened? Because
It's all of that is part of it, and it's a learning experience for everybody. It's a learning experience for, the regulators of the state of New York, and hey, what do we have in place to handle these situations? It's a learning experience for the referee and Dan Mergulata because, hey, he's trying to make a call and he's doing things at that speed while the commentators are going, can you show me that again? Can you show me that? Can you do it from this angle? A little bit different. And then it's a learning experience for fight corners and what they say to their fighters, and for fighters and what they're doing in, are you really hurt? Are you not? All of that. It's a learning experience for all of them.
even us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So on that night, Mergliata called it illegal.
Yes.
And he separated the two. But then I heard him tell Mousasi it was illegal, but I'm not going to deduct the point.
Okay.
Then he goes over and to Chris Weidman, and a doctor is summoned. But during that time as well, there's communication with you. That is allowed. Is that
Yes.
that's what Herb was calling polling, right?
That's polling. Yeah.
Okay. And so during the broadcast, we're just that and Twitter, we're hearing everything, everybody's contribution,
hear everything.
instant replay, this, that, whatever.
You can't do that.
Right. But when Mergliata did get your contribution to it all, and you told him that it was legal, because by then, what did you had actually looked and seen a replay, or
No.
you saw it the whole time?
I saw it live,
with your own,
and that's
all
the
right.
whole thing is when that happened, I'm sitting there and I have a different angle. If you go back and you look, and this is what happens, and this is why people go, well, he's the referee, he's the close one, he sees it. Everything is dependent upon your placement and your positioning. And Dan, I'm going to, straight out, I love Dan Mergliata. He's as good a human being as you're going to get. He's funnier than hell, and he's a great referee.
Great tan too.
Dude, he's got the greatest tan. And that is not a phony tan as far as he does not bake himself in a bed. That's all outside sun. But he's in a position where he's starting to move, and the fighters start to move, because if you look at it, Weidman had Mousasi in a mount, and then Mousasi rolls out of it and comes up, and then Weidman gets down. Mousasi has his head down, and Weidman goes and puts his hands on the ground in a way that is not part of what we're going to say as a ground fighter, because we want fighters to get away from what they're doing. In that situation, we want Chris Weidman, put your knee to the ground. Mm-hmm. Use your hands to defend yourself. Mm-hmm. That's what they're there for. We don't want you putting your hands to the ground,
Because then you're open to
you're
get punched.
open to get your head, uppercutted into the first row. So Dan is taking and he's moving actually towards his right, if you want to say, or the right of the fighters, and the left hand of Weidman, if you look at the angle of him, is going to be covered by Mousasi's body. And so Dan sees something, he reacts off of just instinct in everything that he's been doing over time, and he looks and says, that was down. Mm-hmm. And it's understandable. And it's a mistake, and it's a mistake that I can make, that anybody can make. It's part of being human, but he's trying to protect a fighter from something that he looks at and goes, I think that's illegal.
Right.
And
I would say 99% of anybody that was watching thought it was illegal, because
Sure.
what the other 1% does know is palm. If we get to the whole point of the two hands, palms
We'll
or
talk
fists with
about it.
pressure, right?
Sure.
Right. And so, all right.
So when you look at it, he stops it and he brings it apart. What everyone's not looking at is they all look and say, that was unfair to Chris Weidman. And in a way, it kind of is to a point. But no, it's unfair to Gegard Mousasi. Mousasi's the guy that got screwed over, except for the ending. Okay, because Mousasi does things that are all legal for him to do. And he hurts, we'll say, Chris, because Chris is going to say, I'm hurt. Okay. So if you're going to say you're hurt, I'm going to say, okay, you're hurt. He did it legally. And now they're taking him away from you to hurt you more and giving you time to recover from something that was legal. That's bad. Mm-hmm. That's the bad part. And so when we look at it and you look at the whole thing, there's elements of it you look at. When we talk about what is a grounded fighter now, in the state of New York, a grounded fighter, if you were fighting, I would go to you in the back and I say, George, do you have any questions about any of the rules? Is there anything you're not sure about? Is there anything you want me to explain to you? And most of the time the fighters go, no, I'm good. I say, okay, then let me go over some stuff so I know that there's no doubt in your mind about it. Do you understand what a grounded fighter here is in New York? Mm-hmm. And you're going to go, well, explain it to me. Okay. I want you to look at it this way. Same as an NFL running back. You got the ball in your hand, and you're running, and a guy hits you, and you put your hand to the ground, you can still go. They're not going to call you down. But any other part of your body that touches the ground, your forearm touches the ground, your elbow touches the ground, your knee touches the ground, your butt, your back, any other part of your body that touches the ground besides your hands or feet, you are a down fighter. You're grounded, and legally you cannot be kicked or kneed to the face. So what I'm telling you is here you would have to, if you're on your feet and you wanted to make yourself grounded by putting your hands down, you would have to put both hands palms down or fists down bearing weight to make yourself grounded. So what I'm telling you is don't ever fucking do that. What I want to see is I want to see you drop to a knee, put your hands in a position to defend yourself, come into a grappling technique, do something to get yourself out. Don't ever get to this point that we're putting our hands down to the ground. That's only if we'll say you fall to that point. That's the only time I want to see that. Mm-hmm. And we did that in putting that rule in place because we didn't want someone that was hurt falling forward and then have a guy be able to come up and soccer kick or punt him to the face. So the rule has been working beautifully everywhere. Now, it's hard for athletic commission people to understand because it's only how many fights do they do. But I do fights every week, multiple times a week, everywhere, and it's been freaking awesome. We've gotten guys to get away from doing this stupid thing of putting one hand down and thinking they're safe. Mm-hmm. It's changed what they're doing, and that's what we wanted to do. Chris gets in a point where he doesn't understand it the way he needs to understand it, and he puts his fingertips down to the ground. Fingertips do not make you grounded. And in the position that I was at, I couldn't see his one hand, but I could see his hand with his fingertips. And so as soon as Dan called it, I said, that was legal. And then Dan came over and I told him, I said, Dan, he said, hey, did you see it? And I said, yes, it's legal. What he did was legal. You need to tell Chris that if he stays with what he's doing, he's going to lose this fight by a TKO. Mm-hmm. And, Chris's corner is telling him, Chris, you have time. Chris, stay down. They're milking something for their fighter, and I don't blame them. Okay, and Chris is listening to him. Chris, you take a look at Chris Weidman. Look, Chris is as tough an individual as you're going to get. All right? He is an incredible athlete. He's an incredible fighter, but he's in the midst of this. He knows he got hit, but he has his corner telling him something. What's he going to do? He's going to start following what his corner is saying. And so they bring the ringside physician in, and when the ringside physician talks to Chris, he says, what month is it? And Chris says February. Now, does he do it on purpose, or does he do it because he really doesn't know? You can't say, but right away when they came back and said, hey, that's good, he said, it's April 8th.
Oh, he did?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
The date right away.
Okay.
So you look and you go, all right, he's trying to play a game with it a little bit, we'll say. But he played himself into a loss. And that's what other fighters need to look at, too.
Well, if he got the month right, then why did he waive it?
Because
he went off February or other cognitive tests?
He had already said, well, February, and so that's in the doctor's mind. And then they start putting him through some things, and they put his feet together at a certain point, and he takes a step that's not the right step, and they said, that's it. Because they don't want to put a fighter who has been concussed back in the fight so they can be injured more. Mm-hmm. And you can't blame the ringside physician for that. This is part of, if you're not hurt, don't play hurt. And guys do it all the time. And I'm not saying Chris did, but I'm saying you can see it all the time. And if you're not hurt, get ready to fight. Be there for what you're there for. If you end up losing this fight based upon legal action, then so what? It's not the end of the world. But if you do things, and there's been a lot of them. There was a guy in England, he gets hit with a knee, and you can see first thing he does is like this, and then he goes, oh, I'm out. And there's been a lot of fights where guys are not truly injured. But they look at it and say, oh, I can get out of this fight with a DQ win. Don't think that, because it can change. Here's where people go and say, well, they used instant replay, they couldn't use it. Dan Miragliotta came to John McCarthy, and I told Dan it's legal. That was off of me watching it live. And then he came after it, and he goes, can you check on, and he said, Mr. Ratner's replay, because he knows Mark Ratner gets a replay of it. And so I stopped and I watched it. I didn't go to the thing, but I watched it, and I said, yes, again, it's legal. And he can do that. Okay? The real question here is you have a lot of people that are sitting there saying, oh, it's wrong. If you make a decision, go with the decision. And I agree with that until you know that the decision is wrong. Could you imagine if you had that fight and Gegard goes and does this action, it's legal, and he loses the fight because of it? You're going to tell me that that's right? That sits good with you? Oh, well, he can go to the commission and try to get it overturned. No. Gegard won that fight legally. Although it ended in a way that wasn't what we want to see, and wasn't anything that we want to see, the way of a fight to come to an end, Gegard deserved that win if Chris can't go on because he hit him with a legal shot. And so it's for fighters to stop trying to get in this position where, I'm not, this fight may not be going the way it is, because you can look at the first round. It was a close first round. I thought Chris won the first round.
So did I, yeah.
But it was, it wasn't. I've heard people, people out of Chris's corner saying, "Oh, he killed him in that round." It's like, oh no, Chris won that round by one little exchange where he landed the best shot of the round. But it was close. And if you look at the second round, he was losing the second round. Okay, he took some big shots in the beginning of that round, and it was going to take a lot for him to overcome that. And at the point where that fight stopped, that wasn't occurring. So you can look and say, well, that fight at the end of the second round probably was going to be an even fight going into the third round. And, unfortunately, because of what occurred, there was a mistake. The mistake was done by the official. It wasn't, it was a mistake that any of us can make based upon timing. And you go back and you look at how many times did the commentary team have to look at the replay for them to come up and say, oh, I think that's legal. It's not an easy job.
Go ahead. I'll save mine.
Well, what I wanted to talk about was, what are the referee's responsibilities during that sequence? Because I think I've seen some fighters try and get away with the fingertips, and I've heard refs before say, you're open to a legal shot right now. I don't feel like they have to do that, but I think they do it to help the flow of the fight, to avoid situations like that. Is that a responsibility of the ref to have to let someone know whether something's going on, like the position that they're in, or is it up to the fighter to know that?
You know what? You're going to hear a lot of people have different ideas about it. And you'll hear people say, well, you can't tell the fighter because then you're coaching them.
Exactly.
Is that what you're doing? If I'd say, if you're fighting George and George's hands go to the ground and I say, he's grounded, am I coaching you? I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just giving you an idea that, hey, don't throw a knee or a kick to that head area, or you're going to end up having me stop this fight and probably do things that are going to affect you in a negative way. So that's not coaching. And I've never looked at it that way. And I will many times, when a guy is in a position that I know he can't tell if that person is in an up or down position, I'll say, he's grounded. And that's all I'll say. And that's not coaching. That's keeping something from happening in a way that could negatively affect the fight, because our whole purpose is to get through the fight with the fighters coming to the best outcome based upon their skill set.
MMA Junkie Radio. MMA Junkie Radio. MMA Junkie Radio.